Can you hear me? This is the captioner.
Yeah, hi, thanks.
Hi. I think I'm supposed to do this to Zoom. Can you assign me to caption?
Let me see if I can do that. How do I do that?
There's usually like 3 little dots in the corner, and man, I can't remember how it looks on your end. Something about assign a person to type. Google it real quick.
Yeah, sorry. I think like I can make you a host or co-host, but that's not it.
No. Start a Zoom meeting, start manual captioning, click assign a participant to type. Panelists will appear.
Oh, here, I have it under show
Okay.
captions. Hang on one second.
Okay.
Wait. Hang on one second. Who's caption control?
So maybe if you click on my name,
I got it. Here we go.
Oh, yep. That's exactly what I needed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Nikesh.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Caption window. Oh, no, they are.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
So looks like we have quorum right now, but we can wait a couple of minutes perhaps and see. There we go.
Yeah, maybe just one more minute and then I will call us to order here. Give another minute for folks to join.
Great, thanks. It is just 12:30. Everyone's nice and early. Amazing.
I have to ask, Wade, are you in Hawaii? You look like you're in Hawaii, and I don't
He
think
is.
any of us are going to be very happy about that.
I am in Hawaii and I'm dog sitting my brother-in-law's dog, so you may hear some background noise from time to time.
Incredible.
And I have a tea time coming up here pretty soon as well.
Also,
we need to be good.
Yeah, your shirt is perfectly coordinated with your background, so
Oh, well, I planned it that way, of course.
there we go. Happy for
thanks.
you.
Thanks for
amazing.
joining us.
Sure.
Okay, well, I will go ahead and call us to order here. Welcome, everyone. This is the December 12th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting for the City of Portland. I'm the chair, Mary Rain O'Mara, and I'm joined by Commissioner Alexander, Commissioner Ling, Commissioner Patel, Commissioner Spivak, Commissioner Routh, Vice Chair Thompson. And I don't think I missed anyone, and staff members. So welcome, everyone. We are doing a virtual only meeting today, as we have a pretty short condensed agenda. And first up on our agenda today is a request for confirmation for the 2 planning commission letters that will be advanced to City Council, the Lower Southeast Rising and Housing Regulatory Relief letters. So maybe we can just do a thumbs up as indication that folks are good with those 2 letters being advanced as drafted to City Council. And Erica, if you want to just use maybe your, oh, there you are. Okay, great. All right. Well, I am seeing unanimous thumbs up here. So I think we are ready to advance both of those letters as drafted. Thank you, Julie and team, so much for, as always, consolidating a lot of process and outcome into 2 very succinct memos as represented in those letters. Next up is the director's report. Patricia, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair O'Mara, commissioners. I wanted to point out, Chair O'Mara, that I think you missed perhaps on the agenda the items of interest to commissioners. I don't know if you wanted to just cover that very quickly, just in case anyone had anything.
Sure.
And then I'll go
Are
ahead.
there any, thank you, Patricia. Are there any other items of interest from commissioners today? Okay.
Okay, great. So thank you again. Good afternoon. So today, just a very brief director's report from me, and then I've also invited Tom Armstrong to provide an overview of the housing production strategy outreach. This was a request by the commission to see a little bit more about the strategy and the outreach that we're doing on the housing production strategy. So Tom is going to provide that update. But in the meantime, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is the last meeting that we're going to have this year. The last December meeting is going to be canceled, of course, due to the holidays. Looking ahead to next year, we do not have any agenda items, any projects ready to come to commission in the January, for the January meeting. So what we're looking to do is cancel the 2 January meetings and to schedule a late January retreat with the commission. And at that time, at the retreat, we hope to both do kind of a year in review for the current year, 2023, and do a look ahead at the year ahead for the commission in 2024, among other items. So those are just some of the things that we would like to do at the retreat. And of course, we will be reaching out to you to confirm dates for availability and to also talk about the content a little bit more in the agenda. So with that, so with that, I think I'll go ahead and if there are no questions from you, go ahead and pass it over to Tom to talk a little bit about the housing production strategy outreach plan.
All right, good afternoon. Tom Armstrong with BPS. I also have here with me today Ariel Kane, from BPS as well, who will be taking the lead on many of the outreach efforts for the housing production strategy. I will start by saying council is scheduled to vote to adopt the housing needs analysis tomorrow morning at 10:30. We had a hearing last week that went well. We had over 30 people come and testify. I would say 29 out of the 30 people who testified in favor of the AHNA and in favor of the Portland Neighbors Welcome Inner East Side for All proposal. They had a very well organized set of testifiers from a lot of different organizations and a lot of different backgrounds. And so with that, and with the council vote tomorrow, we have begun to pivot to the housing production strategy, and specifically working on two things. One, getting a draft production strategy together with our Bureau partners that we hope to publish by the end of January. And then at the same time, begin organizing our outreach efforts that I'll talk about today and show you. I'm going to share with you just a brief slideshow just to go through the elements. Just as a refresher, we've done the housing needs analysis, the numbers, identified a need for 120,000 new units of housing by 2045. We also, within there, identified some specific housing types like accessible housing, housing for elders, for families that we need to focus on. Now we're embarking on a new state requirement for the production strategy that will really get into a number of different actions that the city can take to promote that, support the production of that needed housing, and also begin to establish a clearer set of measures or indicators that we can track over time. We're going to need to report back to you all, to council, and to the state in 3 years to show our progress report. And then we'll do this all again in 6 years. And so as we get into this outreach phase to get feedback on the draft strategies, we're here in the middle column here. We have, not only do we have a internal city working group that is made up of multiple bureau representatives to help us put together these draft strategies. We also have a technical advisory committee that begins to pull in other outside government agencies, coordinating with the county, with Metro, and with our state partners to get their input on these strategies. And then we'll begin to do the outreach, and that'll hit a number of different levels. We will continue to do outreach and meetings and presentations to key stakeholders, key community organizations, like we did for the housing needs analysis. We went to neighborhood district coalitions. We met with the Portland Home Builders. We met with other community groups to get their input, and we'll continue to do that. In addition to that, we will be launching some larger sort of citywide efforts, both in terms of online surveys and online open houses, as well as having larger community meetings to get outreach from the general public. And then in addition to that, we got a grant from the the state, from DLCD, specifically to support outreach to the BIPOC community. And I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute, but we are going to have a very focused effort to solicit input and priorities from the BIPOC community as part of this effort. And we expect this effort to sort of go through the spring into April. And then at that point, we'll take all that input, we'll make refinements to the draft production strategy, and we'll publish a proposed draft that will come back to you at the Planning Commission in that May-June timeframe. There'll be a public hearing, and we'll seek your recommendation for that production strategy. And then we will forward that to council for adoption sometime this summer. So in terms of the specifics of the BIPOC community engagement, we've sort of divided this up into two efforts. We found on other projects that partnering with community organizations, using those community organizations to craft a focus group discussion and enlist their help in recruiting their sort of members to participate in a focus group has provided some really deep and rich conversation. So we're going to do that again and conduct at least 6 focus groups with hopefully anywhere from sort of 8 to 16 members in the focus group to really have some focused conversations around these issues. And then in addition to that, we will be looking to hold 1 or 2 community meetings with translators and translated materials. And some of that information will be available on the web as well. But again, using sponsoring organizations to help create a more familiar space for people to come and talk about housing issues. We'll try and bring our bureau partners there where they can talk about their programs as well, and really have it both an educational venue as well as a way of soliciting feedback on these strategies. And so here's a timeline for that. You know, we have the grant. We're going to council in early January to get their authorization to accept the grant, and we're already reaching out to organizations to work on scopes of work and get those contracts lined up so that we can begin in January and into February to organize those focus groups and start planning for the community meetings, and looking for those community meetings to take place in March. And then that really gives us, so February and March will be the intensive outreach part of this process, and then really use April to go through all the feedback we get, make adjustments to the strategies, and then be able to, as I said, publish a proposed draft in late April, early May, and bring that to you, and then have it go on to council. You know, some of the key questions that we're seeking input from the community, you know, it sometimes the production strategies, you know, they are like, do this government program or make this zoning changes, and they can be pretty technical. And so we're trying to balance sort of getting some general insight on general community needs around housing, characteristics they're looking for, locations that, what are important amenities, stuff that is more in their terms that we can then internalize and interpret and see how it fits or how we make adjustments to our strategies, to our programs to sort of do that translation from what people are telling us to what kinds of policy actions or programs might be appropriate to what we're hearing. And so, we really want to explore some of these things about the types of housing needed, the challenges people face. We know there is a big issue around accessibility, especially in terms of people with disabilities and elders. That's been a big focus of our work in the past. So we'll want to dig a little deeper into those issues. And then, at the end of the day, we do want to get feedback on priorities. We want to hear about what people think are the most effective programs, and what really they see might address their needs. There is certainly room to identify other strategies that may be missing from the package. And a question that isn't here that we've talked about with our Bureau partners is also around, what existing programs do we have that we should be looking to expand? That, it's not just about the next new thing, but if we're allocating resources and we have an effective program, maybe we should put more funds into that to expand that, rather than create a shiny new program. So those are some of the issues that we want to get into through this outreach, both at the stakeholder level and at the focus group level, and as well as to the general community. Just a reminder, we're looking at a bunch of different strategies that go the full range from funding and incentives to zoning and regulatory changes to permit streamlining, to boost production. And then what's not shown here is that we're also looking at across the income spectrum. It's not just about affordable housing for lower income households. It is about also middle income housing, and how, especially there, maybe focusing in on home ownership opportunities, but then just housing production in general, at all income levels. So, we're looking at sort of these across these three types, but also at a range of income levels. And I think with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions or ideas, or any feedback that you want to give us at this point.
Thank you, Tom, and congratulations on the grant. That's super exciting. I have a question about the affordable housing needs, and is the strategy to partner with PHB in terms of engagement with organizations that work in the field of affordable housing, and also outreach to stakeholders who live in affordable housing, or who might be housing insecure and be seeking affordable housing? Is that the strategy, really, to leverage a partnership with PHB?
Yeah, and at for those different audiences, right?
Yeah.
You've got the sort of the developers, the providers, and the residents, or potential residents that are out there. And so we want to get that input at the variety of levels, because each brings a different insight into the experience and what might be effective. And so obviously the providers can bring a certain insight based on their residents and the residential experience, but it also helps to talk to the residents directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Commissioner Spivak, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom, for the presentation. This is encouragingly swift to get back to us. I had 3 questions. One of them is, I don't know if the Citizen Involvement Committee is active, but if it is, it would be great to bounce the outreach strategy off them because they're probably a better sounding board than we are.
Yeah, they are active, and we will be going to their January 9th meeting with a similar discussion.
Great. Okay. And then with the state grant for bike path communities, is that all sort of a soft survey, or could there be some? I'm just wondering whether like some of the work that Dr. Bates has done to figure out areas of high vulnerability to displacement and what high opportunities are. There's a nice grid from a long time ago. I could see that coming into play on this project, in which case maybe getting an update that would be helpful. So I don't know if that's an option, but
yeah. So we, as part of the anti-displacement project, we have been updating the economic vulnerabilities analysis. And we didn't get into it. The focus of the production strategy is on the action plan, but the state also requires us, they have a very wonky term called contextualized housing analysis. And so we'll be taking the work from the housing needs analysis and sort of, doing a next generation analysis of that, including one of the elements is sort of a fair housing analysis that I think what you're getting at, and, beginning to look at not just where vulnerable populations are, but also access to opportunity and our complete neighborhood analysis. And so our plan is, the update to the economic vulnerability assessment, the data that we're using is about 2 years old. And so once the new ACS data is published later this month, we will be looking in January, February to do an update on that and look at trends in vulnerability through that. But also doing that sort of access to opportunity that really gets at that fair housing analysis. And so that'll be something also that we'll bring back to and be part of the housing production strategy to help guide some of our prioritization work.
Okay, great. And the last one is just if you could say a couple words on infrastructure, because you mentioned that on the side, and I think that is there a grant that you guys have to study that in terms of capacity for?
Yeah, we also have a second grant from DLCD to look at infrastructure capacity in the inner east side. This is something, way back as part of our outreach last spring, last summer, we had already been hearing from Portland Neighbors Welcome about the inner east side for all, their proposal there. Something similar to that has been in our strategic plan and was sort of identified as a future project as part of the comprehensive plan update. So this summer, we actually sort of preemptively went out and sought a grant from DLCD as a starting point. Let's see what kind of capacity constraints do we have? How high could we go, given the existing, sewer and stormwater and water and transportation system that we have, just to get an idea of what's possible. If we want to go beyond that, what kind of infrastructure improvements might be needed, so that we have that information going into a planning process to help us calibrate, or just be realistic. Like if we want to go farther, we're going to have to figure out how to pay for the infrastructure. That's a little different than what we did in the Southwest Corridor and the West Portland Town Center, where we had done a lot of planning work and then ran into some infrastructure capacity problems. So we were going to flip the script here with that, and that grant opportunity presented itself. And so that's a project that, again, we'll be getting going later this spring, and it'll run into and through 2024.
Thank you, Tom. Any additional questions or comments? Oh, go ahead, Vice Chair Thompson.
Hi, thanks, Tom. I had just one additional question, and I was wondering if, as part of the survey effort and outreach, if there would be any attempt to review the existing programs that are in place from a tenant or I suppose even homeowner perspective. I don't know what all programs those would be, but inclusionary housing or affordable housing programs, first-time homeownership, et cetera, just to better understand perspectives on those and learn about what's working and maybe what could use improvement.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where we want to get information again, new program or double down on existing effective programs and getting some insight on what people think are effective programs and also, is it about the programs or where do they, or do you ask a more generalized question about, well, what do you need? What would really help you? Is it down payment assistance? Is it utility assistance? Is it eviction legal representation? Given your housing needs, what assistance would be most effective? And sort of being able to ask those more general questions and sort of approach people where they're at, and then using that feedback to translate it into, it's this program, it's that policy, what is it? Like for inclusionary housing, it's like, well, would you prefer to live in a building that has all sort of low income affordable housing, or would you like to live in a mixed income building where you might be one of a few people that have subsidized affordable housing? And we can work on the language of that, but that may be one of those preference type questions that we ask folks.
Okay, that helps. I guess I'm also wondering about approaching it just from the other side and identifying folks that have already participated in those programs. So for example, looking at folks that are occupying IH units within bigger housing developments and talking to them specifically, or other programs. That's just an example.
Yeah, I don't think we can target people who are residents of IH units. They tried that as part of the recalibration study, and it was really difficult to reach those tenants. We didn't have a lot of cooperation from the property managers to reach those. So I don't know that we can be that targeted. But, as Mary Rain said, talking to residents of affordable housing, and a range of others. We can also, I'm just thinking, we can check with the Housing Bureau and maybe look at reaching out to people that have participated in or are occupants of people that are, like, for example, receiving the home ownership tax exemption, and look to do a survey of them to see how it's going, and does that help, and what would be more effective help, kind of thing. And
I could see there being value in connecting with folks that have had the actual experience instead of as maybe more of a hypothetical about what they would like to see, but also understand that there are challenges and that groups have tried to connect with specific subsets of people, and it's proved challenging.
Yeah.
Any additional questions or comments for Tom and team on housing production strategy? Go ahead, Commissioner Alexander.
Yeah, no questions. First of all, Tom, thank you very much. Just the detail, the focus, the scope of the presentation is encouraging. I guess the only thoughts I have is that the community outreach is going to be problematic. And from the sense that it holds a richness that in order to be beneficial, you're going to have to, in my opinion, narrow the gap between what I believe has been a difference in how the bureaus communicate and how communities hear. And that's not a criticism, but it's a reality. And it's that gap between the head and the heart. And you're really working with people who are in lived experience environments who may not be looking for incremental change, but whose expectations may have been raised by all of the activity and all of the focus around this work. And in many instances, it's very important not to have these communities defined by what's happened to them, as much as the shared opportunity that both city and community share. So I hope that we can somehow try to smooth the what I call a torturous path in sort of harvesting that information and not have to decide between process and progress. I mean, if people are looking for progress, and I think we need to approach that from a policy and I mean, it's process laden, and our way of talking and their way of listening are very different. So I just can't understand, and that's not a criticism as much as a reality that if we don't experience the muddiness that comes along with that, then we're not doing it well. So I offer it, and I'm encouraged by what I hear, but I also think, we're looking for a change, and we've got communities and families who are looking for the change. And that is going to be a challenge for us. And I'm sorry, I didn't start by saying Mike Alexander for the record. Patricia, forgive me. So I just wanted to offer, again, encouraged, but this is, if it's taken with fidelity and authenticity, it's going to be a sobering engagement.
Absolutely. And I think we saw some of that, especially in the comments that came to the Planning Commission as part of the HNA, that sort of impatience, right? That we need action. And I think, as you will see later today, we're not waiting around to do this production strategy before we launch projects, right? We're going out and getting grants to support planning work. We're bringing forward code amendment proposals that on good ideas that make sense right now. So let's get going, kind of thing. And and as you're saying, especially meeting people where they're at and acknowledging their lived experience and their needs are now, not a year from now or 20 years from now, kind of thing. And that is a tension that we need to accept and draw inspiration from, and do that translation into policy and programs that'll make a difference.
Thank you so much. Great discussion. And just echo the appreciation for bringing this forward to us so quickly. Really, really appreciate the ability to get a look ahead here. I don't see any additional hands for comment or question. Does that conclude the housing production strategy update?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Great, so we will go ahead and proceed to our consent agenda. And looking for a motion here to approve the consent agenda as presented in the agenda for today's meeting. Is there a motion to approve the full consent agenda? Commissioner Roth?
Yes,
Okay.
Commissioner Rouse first, and I see Wade.
Okay, Commissioner Lang second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, I think that's a unanimous approval, Julie. And that was the last item for today, unless Patricia, did you have something else?
No, Chair O'Meara, I just wanted to confirm that Julie, are we okay with not doing roll call vote? Are we good with the
Yeah, that's a
vote?
consent.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, Chair O'Meara, thank you so much. We just wanted to wish everyone a very happy holidays as well. Happy holidays,
you.
happy new year, because we will not see you, I think, until the new year. So
Absolutely. Happy holidays. Relax and enjoy, everyone. Thank you so much. I will
Thank you.
I will adjourn today's meeting.
okay,
Thank
thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Get that mulligan, Wade, get that mulligan.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.